when an idea taps you on the shoulder, it wants you to do something with it. So we can say, when love tapped me on the shoulder, it was wanting me to do something. Surely conversations about love are the most important conversations we can be having. Why does love matter in organizations or in business? And because we are human beings working in these things we call organizations, and our deepest humanity has to be activated. Why is love problematic in organizations? Because of the fear of what love demands of me. And
Yeah.
most people who are running organizations are men, and it is particularly tricky for men to contemplate love.
Hi, and welcome to Metaconscious Leaders, where we explore many of the different aspects of metaconscious leadership and what it means to be a true leader in these times of monumental change, challenge, and awakening. Commonly, there is much talk about leadership in terms of performance, strategy, delivery, and so forth. But in this conversation, we shall explore beneath those metrics, because our guest today is Helena Clayton, who is joining us to talk about love. Helena is a leadership and organizational development consultant and a coach with over 25 years of experience across all UK sectors. She designs and runs innovative leadership development programs, works at the London Business School as a program director, and was formerly a director at the Roffey Park Institute, where she carried out award-winning research on leading with love. Helena holds a master's in leadership and learning from Lancaster University, is an accredited coach, a podcast host, and her clients have included Ernst & Young, Wix, Jaguar Land Rover, and the UK Civil Service. In this conversation, I want to explore with Helena not only what she can share about this topic of leading with love, but also the real relevance and practical application of love in the business context generally, and business leadership in particular. So, Helena, welcome to Metaconscious Leaders, and thank you very much for giving your time to us today.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. And I know it took us ages, didn't it, to pin this time down, but we made it. We're talking. And also, it was years since we first met. So I'm delighted that even though it's taken us a long time, we're speaking today. Really great to be here.
And me too, Helena. Let's start with you, Helena, because love is not a typical leadership topic, or it certainly wasn't when you started on this path. What first led you to this, to the inquiry into love in leadership?
Well, I definitely am nodding along to what you said about it wasn't then, but the implication being it could be more welcome now. And I definitely want to say it is more welcome now. Way, way more people are talking with confidence publicly on LinkedIn about love and the need to focus on love in organizations. So it's much more socially acceptable, actually, I think now, from when I first began in 2017, when when I told people I was thinking of researching, writing, speaking about exploring love in organizations, most people said something like, "Oh, well, that's really interesting, Helena, but you don't mean love, right? You mean compassion or empathy." And I would say, No, I definitely mean love." And then somebody else might say, "But you're not talking about staff engagement, right?" "No, I won't." "Well, I might, but no, it's love I want to talk about." So there was then a bit of twitchiness and a bit of a sense that love was a real weird left field, new age flaky thing to be looking at, that it didn't have a place in organizations. And what got me curious was that alongside my working career path, whatever, I'd been always involved in some kind of personal development, started therapy back in my youth. So I'd always done some kind of individual, but increasingly group work. In the years leading up to 2017, I'd done two particular pieces of personal development, one called the Hoffman Process and another with an organization called Celebration of Being, both of which had love right at the heart of what they did and how they did it. And what I saw there on those, I was a teacher of the Hoffman Process for a while, teacher in training, and through many workshops with Celebration of Being, was that when people came to these workshops and when they brought whatever it was they were struggling with, and when that was met with love, there was healing. Not that it was healed, but there was healing. And it was extraordinarily powerful work that changed people. And I started to see that the people who are at these workshops were from every walk of life, but they included people who would put on a classic corporate suit or the equivalent, go to work on a Monday morning into an environment that was mostly loveless. And I started to get interested in how come this person or these people were clearly beings of love, could talk about, be, feel, connect with love. But the minute we all went back into the workplace, something happened. So I got interested in, well, if there's so much love here, where does it go when we go to work? And that was the impetus, I suppose, that got me curious in 2017.
And do you sense a personal purpose in this? The thought comes to mind, why are you doing this as opposed to anybody else?
It does feel like it does fit a path for me, definitely. And so two things, I think. One is I can only say that the first time I thought about doing something with love, I describe it as I woke up one morning and realized I had to do something with love. Now, I have no idea what that even means, but it felt like Elizabeth Gilbert, who writes a lot about creativity and all sorts of things. She says, when an idea taps you on the shoulder, it wants you to do something with it. So if we can say, when love tapped me on the shoulder, it was wanting me to do something. And Elizabeth Gilbert says, look, you can turn your back. You can decline the invitation. And if you're lucky, you'll get a second tap on the shoulder. But if you ignore it, that idea will go off and find somebody else to do it, to bring it to life. So I found myself saying, I don't know what this means, but I'm going to do something with love. So that's where it came from.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of reasons for me why love matters and why it matters for me. One is I know the parts of me that are unloving. I know the parts of me that are unkind, withholding, controlling, bullying, or cruel. I know those parts of me really well, and I don't want them to run me. I know they exist and I know why they're there, but I don't want to live from those parts. So there's
Right.
something about it being a personal thing. But that's widened a lot as I've done more, I don't know, as I've deepened my immersion into thinking, writing, running workshops on love. And that is that um, the state of the world, the way that we live, the way that we've set up the world to work, does not naturally incline us to connect, be intimate, be loving. I mean, I think we are at heart creatures of love. We are human beings, are beings of are made of love. And the way we've set things up around us, including in our organization, inclines us to make others wrong, to separate, to cancel others, to criticize. And I think we're in one hell of a mess at the moment. And I was listening to a talk by a lama called Rod Owens, I want to say, from Gaia House. And he said something that I thought, yep, that's exactly right. At these times in which we live, surely conversations about love are the most important conversations we can be having. So there we go. It's a bit of a ramble, but several strands to why am I doing this?
Well,
Work
thank you for sharing that, Helena. And the point that you made, the experience that you've had of the tap on the shoulder, is one that is so resonant with a number of people that I talk to. It's like there's a tap on the shoulder, and I ignored it, but it came again, and it wouldn't go away. And then my life got very difficult, so I had to. I take notice of the tap on the shoulder. So yeah, that's beautiful, and also the other things that you revealed about your shadow side, I suppose. Because when we recognize and connect with that, it's very empowering, actually, I think. Yeah. So let's go to the obvious question, which is, when you say love in a leadership context, what actually do you mean? And what are you talking about, and what aren't you talking about?
Yes. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I say that flippantly, but I don't, because what I don't do is define it. So when I did my very first piece of, annoyingly perhaps, but I don't, for good reason, I think. When I first did my bit of research back in 2017. And yes, the link to Roffey Park was I submitted that piece of research to their research competition, and it won it, which was great. So that gave me great confidence. I felt like I had a platform to say stuff on the back of that. But when I did that first piece of research, I was asking people about love, and I said, I'm not defining it. Because the minute I define it, it reduces it and it shears off a load of nuance and it limits the way that you'll think about love. So I didn't define it, and I still don't, because I don't think I can possibly do that. So what I do often act as is a bit of a broker in terms of pulling together the ways that other people describe love or think about love. I don't necessarily do it myself. And sometimes it is really helpful to have a go at it. And I do that in two ways. So in the research, I said to people, to what extent does love matter in organizations? Who thinks it does? And 90 something percent said, oh, no, it really matters. And then later on in the research, I said, but what does it mean in practice? What does love look like in organizations in practice? And the answers were really interesting, and I've done a lot more with them since then. But there were 5 themes. One was care. Now, that's no surprise, right? So a bucket that had in it care, empathy, compassion, nurture. That was a theme, no surprise. But there were 4 other things that people said, this is love. The second was listening. So people said that when they were listened to, when somebody gave them their full attention, when somebody was fully present to them, that was love. And that was such a strong theme. So that was a bit of a surprise to me. So something about deep listening, being fully present. The third thing was setting high standards and holding people to account, holding me to account. So something about being straight talking, giving difficult feedback, saying no, saying, what did you make more important? Why didn't you do that? That was a form of love. Again,
Yeah.
interesting. The fourth thing was something about generosity. It is when I put my needs second and I put your needs first, when I stand back, or when I create space or ground for you, that was love. Now, that is tricky, because for many people listening, they might know full well that they overgive, that they put themselves so far back that it is not loving to them. It may be loving for the other person, but it's not loving to them. So there's a fine line to be walked. It was clear from the research between generosity and sacrifice or martyrdom, but that's for another conversation. And then the final thing was accepting people for all of who they were. So seeing people's shadow side, accepting that everyone, including yourself, is flawed.
It reminds me of Carl Rogers' unconditional positive
Right,
regard as
right,
a way of saying it without using the word, which I think
yeah,
was his intention.
right. That's right. So,
Yeah.
so those were some of the things that came from the research. And then I've gone on to explore how things like hope and compassion and forgiveness and anger and joy and a number of other things are also forms of love. So, but that kind of list, people actually like that a lot, because it starts to give some very practical ways that if I do these sorts of things, there's a good chance that will feel loving to other people. So I don't define it, but I do put some color in.
And it intersects, doesn't it, as you've begun to mention there, with other emotional or psychological aspects. And another one that comes to mind is vulnerability
Mm.
as being an aspect of it, which is so also linked up with and is a grounding for creativity, growth, and so forth.
And I think I'm always playing with this. So every month I run a always free 2-hour Acts of Love for Tough Times workshop. We begin by looking at what's tough in our lives, what's tough in the world. And then we pivot and we look at an aspect of, well, we look at something and we say, how might this different thing each month, how might this be a form of love that is medicine for these tough times we're in? And last month, I looked at how letting go was a form of love. And I don't sort of say to the group, I'm strongly advocating that letting go is love. I create a series of prompts and we just explore together, how might it be a form of love? So I really enjoy exploring it from a range of perspectives.
How do people get to attend that workshop? Because
Uh,
or that
yeah.
session, because I can put it in the show notes, and I'm sure that people will be interested in that.
Otherwise, find me on LinkedIn. It'll be a pinned event. Sign up for my newsletter. It'll be a pinned event. Sign up for my newsletter, helenaclayton.co.uk. I think I am.
Yeah.
I think that's my
Okay.
website. Yes, sign up for my newsletter and you'll get all the dates there. But yeah, everyone is welcome. It's always a lovely, lovely group that gathers.
Brilliant. So we think mainly of love as being something that we do or we project or we have for something else or someone else or something other. But the most important one I feel is the relationship that we have for ourselves.
Yeah.
Will you talk to that? Am I right in assuming that, when we're talking about love in business and love in leadership and so forth, we need to be starting from love of self and acceptance of self, deep radical acceptance of self?
Hugely. I mean, just hugely. And I think arguably that's the hardest part. Very often when I run workshops, or sometimes depending on the workshop, start with a Buddhist meditation called the Metta Bhavana meditation, which is a loving kindness meditation. And it's a beautiful, beautiful meditation. And it asks us to, I'm going to go in a slightly different order, asks us to hold people in mind and wish them well. May you be happy, may you be well, may you live in peace. And the people that we're invited to bring to mind might be a friend, somebody we're in a disagreement or conflict with, somebody we don't know terribly well, like a neutral
Yeah.
person. But it
Yeah.
also includes ourselves. So we begin with ourselves. May I be well, may I live in peace, etc. And when I debrief that, or at least when we just finish that meditation and there's some space to say, how was that? Many, many people say the hardest bit of that meditation, of that visualization, was to think lovingly and kindly and warmly towards themselves. A lot of people find it easier to cultivate feelings of warmth and love and connection to somebody they dislike or have fallen out with than to themselves.
Wow.
So it does begin there,
Yeah.
and it's not easy because
Yeah.
it requires that we go in and also that deeply inside. And also what we think of as love is hugely influenced by what we came to think of as love as a child. So our connection with love today as adults requires us to go deeply in and often deeply back. Yeah, important work.
I saw you somewhere referred to love as being a verb.
Hmm.
And I was wondering whether that, which I love it as opposed to being a thing. And it's almost an expression of being.
Mm.
And then I was wondering whether you have the same sense that this can be kind of stretched to love as a radiance, love as a presence, to the extent that that in a way is also a behavior. It's a state that we can put ourselves in, a state of loving. Does this resonate with how you see things?
Yeah, very much. And it's easy to see those as binary: love as doing, love as being, love as action, love as an internal stance towards mankind or self or the world. And it isn't that at all. It's really connected. But it's a useful distinction to make. One of the early podcasts I did was with a fab guy, it's still on my website, called Stefan Cantore, an academic from Sheffield, I think. And he said, look, I can talk to you about love, but I would feel much more comfortable talking to you about loving, treating it as a verb, gerund, as an action. And he really opened my mind to that. Lots of people since I've had conversations with where if we can identify things, ways of doing things, actions that are loving in the world, it's somehow manageable. It's like if I do things that are loving, there's a good chance that it would be received as loving. I mean, not guaranteed. And I was just finishing Marcus Buckingham's new book called Design Love In. So Marcus Buckingham is the Gallup guy, the strengths-based guy. Sorry, Marcus, I know you're a lot more than that, but there we go. His new book is Design Love In. And it's about building in love to organizational cultures so that your team feels loved. It's as much actually about customer love, customer experience, which isn't my bag quite so much. And it's a good book. I highly recommend it. And it's definitely the clue is in the name, I suppose. Design love in, do things, create experiences, do this, do this, do this, and it will be loving. A little reductive for my liking, but super helpful because it does kind of offer a range of practices that would be more loving than unloving. So that's helpful and essential. And so many authors talk about love is what you do. Love is how you show up. But there is another part of this. It's like how is my being in relation to love? What is my stance? Bert Hellinger, grandfather of the field of systemic constellations, he has a phrase, he's long dead, love is a wide-angled lens.
Right.
So there's something about when I come up and out, when I stand back and then further back, and then come up a bit more and stand further back. He would say, I think, that we can't help but see the world more lovingly. When we understand the context that this happened in or that resulted in that, whatever the this and the that might be, then we can open to more compassion and from compassion to love. So one of the ways we can cultivate a loving stance is through taking the bigger and then a bigger and then a bigger perspective.
Right. And okay, so that's actually a really neat segue into going, as I kind of would phrase, meta, to inquire about love from a philosophical perspective, or view it, or inquire of it from a philosophical perspective. So at one end of the spectrum, we can, or some would consider love as a merely human passion. Others consider it as the underlying fabric or fundamental energy even of the universe. How do you see love in this way, in a philosophical sense?
I do see it as the water and the air and the wind of the ground we stand on. And I'm increasingly seeing it, not even seeing it, experiencing it that way. I think the ground we stand on is love, or whatever we lean back into is love. And I get very woolly in this kind of territory, but it's my sense that love is what holds us. And I wasn't raised in any kind of religious or faith-based framework at all. And it took me, I'm 62 now, so it must be, 25 years ago, I first really started to do business with the word spirituality. I had a bit of an allergic reaction to it. And then I had such an allergic reaction, I thought, I think I need to be curious about this. So it's taken me probably 25 years to be okay with using the word God and not mean it in a biblical sense, to be okay with using the word divine and know that it means all of nature and more, and not be in any way able to say what I mean. And all of that is love. So yes, so you can tell I'm a little above my pay grade here, talking to you about the philosophical dimensions of love, but I think it is all about love and reconnecting with love, because we have been separated from it. There we go.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So why does love matter in business? Can we take our attention to that particular aspect of this, and why is it important in business, and especially now? And when I'm thinking now, I'm thinking context, because context is so important to meaning, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you frame where humanity is and the state that we find ourselves in at the moment?
Well, you began by asking what's the link. Why does love matter in organizations or in business? And I think my response is because we are human beings working in these things we call organizations, and our deepest humanity has to be activated, protected, given space, freed up, in a way that acts against the squashing of our humanity in most organizations and in business. So I think there's the liberating of our deepest humanity. That's what love in organizations for me is in service of. I struggle more with thinking about love in business, because that takes me to things like profit and the like. I am not it was my objection, I think, to the Marcus Buckingham book, is using love in service of making more profits. That it's not a thread I'm interested in. And to be fair to him, he does say that love is all about helping human beings flourish in organizations. But it's just a call to stay connected and reanimate our deepest humanity. It's soul work, and soul work doesn't necessarily only belong in esoteric weekend workshops. I think it's also the work of all of us who live and work together to try and do that work together.
Yeah. So the research that you did with Roffey Park, it showed, I think, that 90% of people believed that love was important at work.
Right. They did. When I said, and how many of you are comfortable talking about love at work, that people, with about 30%, most people said, oh, no, thank you. No, not really. So yeah, it mattered. And people could see straight away it was problematic to talk about. Still is, of course. But I think the years have gone by, it's nearly a decade, and COVID happened, which I think changed a lot. And the world has got more fragile, which is also meaning that love is more interesting, or people are more curious about it, how we might need it and how we can cultivate it.
Okay. To what extent is those 90%, or to what extent was the audience that you were inquiring of self-selected? And to what extent was it, is it representative of the business population at large?
Not in any way, shape or form. So people self-selected to complete a survey that had "Let's talk about love" or an equivalent in the title. So they were very self-selecting, which makes complete sense. But when I'm running a leadership program with senior leaders, no matter how senior they may be, in what kind of context, and I introduce myself, I always say, and I research, run programs, run workshops, exploring love in leadership and love in organizations.
Okay.
And very few people faceplant. More people than not find some way to say, it's interesting, tell me more.
Right.
And I think by talking about love really clearly and advocating for it and saying it belongs in the workplace, we are human beings, love is already here, how can we recognize that and build on it? Most people recognize that as a truth and want to do something with that or about it or are open to it. Yeah. Even though, as you say, that 92% or 93% is not in any way an indication of the general population.
Yeah. What would those people who were self-selecting for the research declared what they declared, and they were, I think, roughly a third, you were saying, were not comfortable talking about it, even though they considered it to be important.
Actually,
Is that
two-thirds
right? Two
said they
thirds.
were not comfortable. A third said they
Two-thirds.
were, it was really high.
Now, what would you say to, if you like, the majority of, or the rest of the business community that haven't even considered it? What would you say to them as being reasons for love in the workplace as being important, and important not just from the point of view of humanity, but from the point of view of business and leadership?
Well, there is a nice link here, and I will go back to the original research, actually, and I have seen this played out in slightly different formats. I asked in the survey, in the research, with more love here, wherever he was, with more love, what could be possible in your organization? And 4 things. It was a beautiful thread. The first was, with more love, I would be a better version of me. I'd feel bigger, confident, brighter, so I'd be a better version of me. That was the first thing. And I would be able to take more risks because I would feel safer. And when I feel safe, because there was more love, I'd feel safer. When I feel safer, I wouldn't have to expend so much energy trying to make myself feel safe. I could use that energy to try out new things, be bolder, take more risks. So I'd experiment more, I'd be looser, freer. Lovely. They then went on to say, and with that, I would be more likely to cooperate and collaborate with them over there, or him or her, than compete. So already you started to see this flow. I'd be brighter, I'd feel safer, I'd take more risks, I'd join up with them more, I would collaborate. And when we collaborate, then we can do better thinking. And that's where the link to business. Then we can be more innovative, we can be more creative, we can think better together. So that's, I think, is the link to business. And that is the flow, which seems to me to make a good business case for love. Although I notice on behalf of love, I feel angry that somebody has to make a business case for love. But if there was one, I think that flow does quite a good job of it.
Well, yes, I agree with you about having to make a business case for love, but we all have different perspectives. Whether we like it or not, at some level, in some context, we do look at things from a business perspective.
Sure.
As soon as we charge for our services, we're looking at it from a business perspective. We're not saying, well, I don't know, you pay me what you think I'm worth or what you can afford. We don't do that. So to the extent that that is the case, we are acting from a physicalist paradigm, as
And the
opposed to a paradigm of one and unconditional loving, which is there is plenty for all and we all share and share alike. Ownership doesn't have a place.
And the reality for now is that we are operating in an extractive capitalist system. So that's the reality.
Correct.
Let's
And
work
we are
within
all
it.
participants in that and beneficiaries of that.
Absolutely.
And when I say we, I mean those of us who are. I'm not saying that everybody on the planet in humanity is. I think that's far from the case, but certainly the wealthier ones are. So what does a loving organization look like? I mean, I think you've started to identify there a number of different aspects to it. Is there something overarching that you would say of a loving organization, or that you could describe, or any examples that would come to mind of practices and behaviors that occur in loving organizations?
Well, this is where, when those people 10 years ago said, you don't mean love, do you? You're going to end up talking about care and compassion and empathy. And I said, no, I'm going to talk about love. This is where, of course, they were right, because currently, I think the best we can do in terms of putting love at the heart of our organization is really, really focus on and build in practices that are about care, passion, and empathy and nurture, and really seeing the whole person. And you can do an awful lot of that without using the word love. So, those people, they were absolutely right, because of course, most organizations are not ready or wanting to put love front and center of their values, for example, or they don't want to use that word in meetings. I get it. It's okay. You don't have to. So I think it comes back to some very simple practices that have been written about for decades by trillions of people, but about putting person-centered practices at the heart of how we run organizations. We can still, of course, focus on profit, because that is the system we're in. But it's how can we do both? How can we pay attention? Of course, the metrics and quarterly results, of course, they're going to be around for a long time, while at the same time having a deep, abiding, deeply rooted commitment to the very tender human beings that we come alongside in our work.
And to the wider natural world, for instance, the environment, the home we live on, the cosmos.
Yeah.
What does an unloving organization look like? What are the characteristics of that?
Yeah, I think it's the opposite of where we've just been exploring, which is an organization that pays no attention to the human being, to the human being. It's all about, or almost all about, the rules, the processes, the procedures. Again, I've always said, and it was lovely to read in Marcus Buckingham's book, is that we know when something is loving and when something is unloving. Like, I've always said that I know when I do something that is loving and when I do something or say something that is unloving. Even if the other person wouldn't know, I know. And it's the same in organizations. We know when something is loving or unloving.
Why do unloving organizations exist? What's in it for them? I'm trying to get
Because
to the kind of underlying
Yeah.
reason for people not doing, or any of us, it shouldn't be them, people out there, for any of us acting in a way that isn't deeply loving. Why do we do it?
Well, I guess I come back to, and I would love your take on this, because it's a good question. I come back to one of the places where we started, actually. I know that sometimes the parts of me that are controlling or vindictive or whatever make decisions for me. And I notice me doing something that comes from one of those parts that is not loving. And there will be good reason for it. So that would surely be true of every human being, including those who work in organizations and run organizations. So what's the chunked up version of that? I think it's in part that we have shadow sides, and organizations have shadows, just as human beings do. And we act out of those unconsciously. There are other reasons too, I think. The lovely quote, "You can't be a hurried person and a loving person," from an American pastor called John Mark Comer. I think there's something about the way we've set up life to be at such a fast pace that sometimes we just override our more tender aspects. So it's easier. I think it's true for me anyway. It's easier for me to be loving when I'm slower, and life doesn't, set
Yep.
things up for me to be slow very easily.
Yep.
And I think because the way we set up our organizations is based on speed and efficiency and squeezing assets and getting more for less. So there are probably many, and because we can, right? We let it be that way. We choose to, well, it is a choice, arguably, but many of us are locked in to organizational life, organizations that are unloving, and we feel we have no choice but to stay, or we have no choice but to suck it up. And we feel sometimes we do lack voice or power or agency to change anything. We think this is the way it is. Why do you think?
Well, I was very struck by a piece that came out in your research where you said that love is universally recognized but socially suppressed, or I would probably say culturally suppressed. And I think that's the kind of the rock and a hard place where our own natural instincts, now probably that's too woo-woo perhaps, but where our essential nature really comes up hard against a physicalist culture. So we know that love is the ground of all being in our hearts. Okay, let's just take that. But when we step into the world and into business and all the rules and regulations and the the Articles of Association that says that our fiduciary duty is to look after the shareholders and maximize profit and blah, 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 then we find ourselves in another universe and we are conflicted. So, and in that space, love has no place. And yeah, my feeling is that I even have the thought that if you bring love into a physicalist paradigm or a physicalist, materialistic company, group, organization, then you threaten the basis on which it is, you threaten its metrics, you threaten its purpose, and therefore you block it out. Because the purpose of a physicalist, and look, this is a gross generalization, because I don't believe that there is a this type of company and a that type of company. There's a whole array of companies, all right, and it's very complex. So, but this is generalizing in order to kind of differentiate. But a company that is physicalist is focused on profit, extractive. Its main metric is to make profit. At the other end of the scale, we know that the current model is not working. It is profoundly broken. And to talk about love in that instance can be the foundation, but it doesn't have a place in where we are tied up in a physicalist mindset. Does that
Beautifully put, Greg. It really does. And I think you're right about the threat that love brings when you invite it or suggest it should be included in some way. It's very disruptive, very threatening, very discombobulating. And I think that creates a lot of fear in people. One of the quotes from the research, why is love problematic in organizations? Or somebody said, because of the fear of what love demands of me. And
yes.
I think there's another factor too, is that most people in organizations who are running organizations are men. And it is particularly tricky, I think, for men to contemplate love. I've written elsewhere and spoken about how love is gendered. And I've spoken to most, in fact, of my people who come to my workshops are women, not exclusively by any chance, but mostly. And I got interested in how come this was the case, and spoke to several men who work exclusively with men, to men who coach only men and work on exploring this. And they said, yeah, it's really tricky for men to contemplate love because of their socialized personal relationship with the word. Plus the fact that men and women think that love belongs at home, not in the workplace. So there are lots of social assumptions made. That means that it's really hard to bring the word love in. So if we end up talking about care and compassion and nurture and empathy, big yes to that. I'll take it all because it's at least some way, right, towards
Yes.
talking about things that are the subsets or under the umbrella of love. I am really up for anything
Yeah.
that points towards love, and I don't have to use the word as long as I have a sense that the group, the organization, the field is softening to and expanding the heart, really. Yeah. And a shout out for two people who are doing great work in this field, and that's Nicholas Yanni and Amy Elizabeth Fox. And
Yes.
their new book, Leading in Chaos, is lovely because it's great in so many ways. But one of the things I love about them both is they both work with major global organizations. And they talk about love and trauma and spirituality and the mystery and.
Yes.
And they do so with huge organizations. So they really are pioneering. Really, they talk about healing, the importance for collective healing in organizations. So that's radical, right? That's really radical language.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a big shout out to the work they're doing. Very pioneering work.
Yeah. I agree. It is brilliant.
Expanding the hearts of so many people in big corporates.
What you were saying there about love and men reminds me of work I do with emotional intelligence. And this is Roche Martin and the Emotional Capital report. So it's a really good emotional intelligence profile. And in particular, what strikes me is the number of especially senior executives, and yeah, in the majority men, but they can also include the women, where empathy is scored very low. And indeed, people will score themselves low on the self-assessment, as well as being scored low on the 360. Now, when you talk to these individuals, it's not that they're not empathic. When you talk to them about their family, and they are the most loving, empathic individuals just as much as any of the rest of us are. It's just that they don't consider it to be relevant or appropriate in the workplace.
Absolutely.
And I think the same goes for love in a lot of cases. It's like that's something that you do at home. It's not something you bring into the workplace.
Somebody said to me that so love didn't, when we were talking about does love belong in the workplace, it was love requires me to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a weakness, and weakness does not belong in the workplace. It's like, whoa, wow, that's quite a, it's quite a series of steps. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then Brené Brown will point out that if you don't have vulnerability, you don't have creativity, and you don't have growth, and you don't have a bunch of other stuff, which is what companies are looking for from their staff members.
And I'm thinking too of Robin Schuett, who talks about, other people talk about this as well, that the water table of emotion in organizations is fear. A colleague of mine said, oh, it's more like terror, but let's go with fear. Let's go with fear for now. And when I say that to groups of people in organizations, they nod with a great deal of recognition. It's, fear of being told off, fear of getting it wrong, fear of lagging behind, fear of looking like you can't cope, fear of looking like an imposter, fear of losing your job. The list is absolutely flipping endless.
Yes.
So fear is an emotion that contracts us, and love is an emotion, arguably, that expands us. So when or if fear is the abiding emotion and we are contracted in work, it does make it very hard to then soften and expand when we are fearful. Just like I feel huge compassion for people in organizations because it's a big ask to invite people or encourage people to allow yourself to soften and expand when you may be very fearful.
Yeah. And that has me thinking that fear is essentially comes about, one way of looking at it, through the idea of separateness.
Right.
I am separate. and therefore I have to look after myself and I've got to defend myself and do all sorts of other things. All the fear that goes around that, being alienated and so forth. And love as being the opposite, which is actually I'm one. We are one.
Right. Yeah.
And it's that interplay, which I don't think is anything that we can bypass or avoid. And it's not about that. But when I think when our appreciation or awareness around that grows, and to the extent that it grows, it provides us with a greater tolerance or acceptance of what is unfolding in this moment, of which we have pretty much zero control, I believe. This has been a wonderful conversation, Helena. Thank you so much. On behalf of those listening, and also especially for myself. For me, there are three things stand out. One is that thing that we spoke about just a moment ago, that love is universally recognized but culturally suppressed. I think that's it really resonates with me, because it shows the divide that I think is being bridged now. We are crossing over. I keep on saying people. I mean us. I mean we, because I'm no different to anybody else. The reason I'm doing this is I'm on a personal journey, personal discovery. So this podcast is a way of me fulfilling that in a way. And something that you said about that came out in your research, which was that love is a doing. It's not a sentiment. It's something that we put into practice, and it's being in action, in doing. So it's not doing, it's being in the doing. Or as Mother Teresa had it, it's not the doing that counts, it's the love in the doing that counts. So, penultimate question. What's one question, thought, or practice that you would leave us with as we bring this wonderful conversation to a close?
Well, I think the simplest one is just to check in with yourself, oneself, myself. Is this loving or is this unloving? The thing I'm about to say, or the thing I've just said, or what I'm about to do or not do, is it loving or is it unloving? And just treat it as a thought experiment. And just notice what you notice about, just notice what you notice. That, I think, would be the simplest experiment to do.
Build the awareness. Be
I
curious.
So.
Yeah. And the last question, Helena, where can people contact you and generally find out more about the remarkable work that you're doing?
My website, helenaclayton.co.uk, is mostly up to date. And I have a newsletter, a monthly newsletter, so you can sign up to that via my website, and find me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect. And I'm not a massive poster on LinkedIn, but I do share some good stuff from time to time. So it'd be lovely to meet people there as well.
Right. Brilliant. Well, Helena, thank you very much. Immense thanks to you for sharing all that you shared with us today. God bless. Be well.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you for all the work that you do in this space. It's beautiful and important. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. I do hope that you found this conversation with Helena as enlightening and inspirational as I did. You can find the links that she talked about in the show notes below, and I do urge you to reach out and connect with her, as she has a very grounded approach to this topic. At heart, she's a realist, I think, and says it as it is, which is wonderful in an age when we don't want to be beating about the bush. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, as this greatly encourages the algorithms to spread our conversations to a wider audience. And please, also leave a comment and share what you're thinking. We love hearing from you as well. This is Metaconscious Leaders with me, Greg Suart. Until next time, be present and be well.